Introduction to Psalm 23. Psalm 23, folks. If you've ever had a moment of distress or difficulty, you've probably heard this well-known passage. It's almost like a comforting hug, the kind of wise advice we all need, especially in life's more challenging moments. For many, Psalm 23 is much more than sacred words. It's a guide to faith and strength. But today, we're going to focus on one specific part of the psalm, the valley of the shadow of death. Yes, it sounds heavy, right? But actually, this symbolism carries far more than just the idea of something gloomy. It speaks about how God walks with us through the tough moments of life. And let's be honest, who hasn't faced a valley at some point in their life? Let's unravel this mystery together and understand what it's really trying to teach us. Now, if you're already wondering how the valley of the shadow of death fits into your life, trust me, you're not alone. The difficulties we face on our journey aren't easy to handle, but this psalm provides the answer for those seeking strength in words of faith. In times of internal struggles, it's nearly impossible not to question what's going on, why we're going through this, and what to do to overcome it. Have you ever found yourself wondering how to move forward when everything seems to crumble? The good news is that Psalm 23 has everything to do with this journey. And guess what? It shows us a simple yet powerful answer: God's presence. And what about the valley of the shadow of death? It's not just a place of darkness and fear. No, my friend. It's a reminder that even when we feel alone, there's a protective presence walking alongside us. In this video, we'll break down this concept, starting with what this valley really means and how it symbolizes not only the difficulties but also the overcoming. Get ready, because throughout this journey, you'll discover a profound comfort. Psalm 23 teaches us that no matter how dark the path seems, the light is always there, beside us. Before we dive deeper, remember, Psalm 23, while simple, is a true guide for those seeking solace and direction. And as we explore together, that valley of the shadow of death will stop being just a gloomy term and will take on a new, powerful meaning in your life. Stay with me till the end, because you'll want to share this knowledge with others. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, right? Let's get started. What does the valley of the shadow of death mean? The valley of the shadow of death is an expression that evokes images of a dark, fearful, and uncertain place. When thinking about it, many might imagine a moment of deep anguish where the light seems unreachable. However, this valley is not a sentence of endless suffering. On the contrary, it represents a stage, a phase in all of our life journeys. In Psalm 23, the valley is a metaphor for any difficult moment we face. No matter how dark the road seems, this valley is, in a sense, challenging us to walk through it with faith. Have you ever felt lost in a difficult moment, not knowing where to go? That's exactly what Psalm 23 shows us. Crossing the valley is not the end, but a means to an end. It's not there to destroy us, but to transform us. And while you go through that moment of darkness, you are not alone. God is with you, guiding every step, even if you can't see Him. The journey is tough, but it has a purpose. This valley is actually fertile ground for spiritual growth. It's essential to understand that the valley of the shadow of death is not a literal place. The shadow here symbolizes something in our way, but it can't fully harm us. Even when the sense of darkness surrounds us, the shadow cannot kill our faith. On the contrary, it's in these difficult moments that we find our true inner strength. The valley teaches us that, despite all the challenges that arise, there is a light that never goes out. Even in the struggle, there is a promise of overcoming and light. Let's be honest, we all go through valleys at different moments in life. It could be a loss, an illness, or even a financial crisis. But Psalm 23 challenges us to see these moments not as defeats, but as opportunities. The valley of the shadow of death is a stage we must all pass through, and how we handle it defines our ability to overcome. You may not see the immediate way out, but trust me, the valley has an end. It will pass. So, the next time you find yourself in a valley in your life, remember that it's temporary. Darkness won't last forever. Psalm 23 teaches us that, even as we go through difficulties, God's presence never abandons us. The valley is not the end, but an essential part of the journey that prepares us for something greater. And in the end, you'll be stronger, wiser, and closer to God. The symbolism of the valley in the Bible. In the Bible, the symbolism of the valley is multifaceted and has a transformative power. The valley can be interpreted as a place of testing and preparation. In many moments throughout the scriptures, biblical figures faced valleys, adversity, where their faith was challenged. And in each of these moments, the valley was not an obstacle, but a place of refinement. Think of the valley as a spiritual training ground. It's where we're shaped, tested, and prepared for what lies ahead. The valley can also be seen as a place of internal struggle, a space where our weaknesses are exposed. And this is precisely where faith reveals itself. When you face a valley, your faith is tested and strengthened. The valley of the shadow of death shows us that it's in the toughest situations that we can find our true strength. It's not suffering that defines us, but how we respond to it. The Bible speaks of characters like Job, who faced a deep valley of losses, but his faith and perseverance led him to victory. On the other hand, the valley can also be viewed as a symbol of humility and brokenness. Crossing the valley is often a process of humility. Many of the great biblical leaders went through valleys before becoming who they were. Moses spent 40 years in the desert, facing the valley of doubt and solitude, until he became the leader of the people of Israel. The valley, then, is not just a place of suffering, but a place of transformation that prepares hearts for great responsibilities. Every valley is a chance for spiritual renewal. When we see the valley from this perspective, it ceases to be a negative place and becomes a place of opportunity. It's an invitation for introspection and for strengthening our inner being. Even though the walk is difficult and filled with obstacles, it's in the valley that our faith becomes firmer. How can we apply this in practice? The next time you face a difficulty, look at the valley as a chance to grow. Face it with courage and faith, knowing that it won't be eternal. So, if the valley is a symbol of transformation and preparation, the Bible teaches us that everything has a purpose. Even in the difficulties, something greater is being worked out in our lives. And it's important to remember that no matter how hard the path is, it always leads to a new level. Psalm 23 reminds us that crossing the valley of the shadow of death is, in fact, a crucial step in our journey of faith. Before we continue, leave your like and subscribe to the channel to be blessed with more videos to inspire your life. God's presence in the midst of difficulties. When we think about crossing a valley, the idea of being alone is undoubtedly one of the biggest concerns. But Psalm 23 gives us a powerful promise. Even in the valley of the shadow of death, God is with us. That changes everything. God's presence in the midst of difficulties is a guarantee that, no matter how dark and tough the road gets, we are never alone. God, the faithful shepherd, is by our side, guiding every step, strengthening us through fear and uncertainty. When you find yourself in a valley, it's natural to feel lost or without direction. But believe me, it's in this moment that you need to open your eyes to perceive God's presence. God is not distant or indifferent to your struggles. He is right there, with you, offering comfort and support. Often, God's presence isn't obvious, but it manifests in small blessings and signs along the way. It could be a kind word, a comforting thought, or an unexpected sense of peace. Imagine you're in the middle of a storm, completely lost. In that moment of turmoil, what would you do if you knew someone was by your side, someone who knew the way and could guide you to safety? This is the promise of Psalm 23. Even in the chaos of the valley, God is there, guiding you with his rod and staff. His presence brings a peace that surpasses understanding, like a lighthouse shining in the dark. And this is something we can't underestimate. God's presence is what sustains us when everything seems to be falling apart. How can you apply this in your daily life? In moments of difficulty, instead of succumbing to despair, Try to pause for a moment and acknowledge God's presence. You might not see it physically, but you can feel it in subtle ways. It could be through a short prayer, a moment of meditation, or simply being thankful for the small blessings that show up even in hard times. This practice of recognizing God's presence will bring more peace to your journey. In summary, God's presence in the valley is what makes the journey possible. No matter how hard or scary the path seems, the promise that God is by our side gives us the courage to keep going. And that prepares us for the next step in our journey. The courage to keep walking, even without seeing the finish line. Lessons of courage and faith. The Valley of the Shadow of Death in Psalm 23 teaches us profound lessons about courage and faith. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to keep going in spite of fear. When we find ourselves in a valley, doubt and fear tend to arise, but it's in these moments that our faith becomes more important than ever. True courage comes when we decide to move forward, even without knowing what lies ahead. Deep down, it's faith that drives us to take that step, trusting that, even though the road seems uncertain, God is guiding us. What we need to understand is that courage doesn't come from our own strength, but from our trust in something greater. When we face a valley, our limited vision can make us feel incapable of moving forward. But by trusting in God's presence, we are empowered to do what seemed impossible. It's interesting to think how fear and faith walk hand in hand, isn't it? Fear is natural, but faith teaches us not to let it paralyze us. Let's use a practical example. Imagine you're facing a big challenge at work and the pressure feels overwhelming. The feeling of being in a valley is real in this moment. The first reaction might be to want to give up. But if you turn to faith and courage, you might realize that instead of running away, it's time to face the challenge with a new perspective. When faith comes into action, you start seeing new possibilities and solutions to the problem. Courage then manifests itself in action, movement, persistence. This dynamic of courage and faith can be applied in any area of your life. It could be a health problem, a financial crisis, or a painful loss. The secret is remembering that courage doesn't mean the absence of fear, but acting in spite of it. When you put faith into practice, courage comes naturally. It's like faith is the fuel for your steps, and courage is the strength to cross the valley. Ultimately, the lessons of courage and faith that the valley teaches us are invaluable. It's not just about surviving difficult moments, but growing through them. Courage pushes us forward, and faith gives us the assurance that, in the end, it will all be worth it. As you cross the valley, you become stronger, more resilient, and more connected to your faith. How to apply Psalm 23 in our lives. Now that we've understood the deep meaning of the Valley of the Shadow of Death, God's presence, and the lessons of courage and faith, it's time to think about how to apply all of this in our daily lives. Psalm 23 is not just a set of beautiful words, it's a practical guide for dealing with difficulties. It teaches us that, even when life takes us through dark valleys, we can trust God to guide us to the light. The first way to apply Psalm 23 is through prayer. Often, when we're in a valley, we're tempted to isolate ourselves, to keep our concerns and pains to ourselves. But Psalm 23 reminds us that God is close, ready to listen. So, when you're going through tough times, try praying in a simple and sincere way. Lord, help me get through this valley with faith. Prayer brings us closer to God and strengthens us spiritually. Another important aspect of applying Psalm 23 is action. Courage is not just a feeling, it's a choice. When you're in a valley, it's important to make decisions that move you forward, even if the road seems uncertain. For example, if you're facing financial difficulties, instead of panicking, take small but decisive actions. Put faith into your practical life by acting confidently, knowing that, even in tough times, you are not alone. It's also crucial to remember that faith is something that needs to be nurtured constantly. When you're in the valley, it's natural to feel like your faith is weakening. However, by reading the Bible, praying, and reflecting on the lessons of figures like David, who went through valleys of difficulties, your faith will be renewed. Daily practice of faith is what keeps your courage burning, even in the toughest moments. Finally, Remember that the valley is not something to fear, but something to embrace. It's a necessary part of the journey. When you apply Psalm 23 in your life, you'll see that in every valley, there's an opportunity to grow, learn, and trust more deeply in God. Conclusion and final reflection. Finally, after exploring the meaning and symbolism of the Valley of the Shadow of Death in Psalm 23, it's clear that this biblical passage is not just about suffering, but about overcoming. The valley is not an end, but an essential part of our faith journey. It teaches us that no matter how challenging the situations are, God's presence is with us, illuminating our path and helping us overcome difficulties. And now, how about sharing this reflection with someone who might need to hear these words? If you found this content useful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Let's continue this journey of faith and learning together.